For a moment, it didn't feel like an interview anymore. The cameras were still there, the lights were still on, but something in Sam Heughan's expression shifted in a way that fans had rarely seen before. He wasn't speaking as Jamie Fraser, and he wasn't delivering one of his usual polished answers. Instead, he seemed to be searching for the right words, not to impress, but to be honest. It began with a simple question about his career. At first, Sam answered the way he always does. He talked about Outlander, about the opportunities it had brought into his life, and about how grateful he was for the journey. His tone was steady, familiar, the kind of response fans had heard many times before. But as the conversation continued, something deeper started to surface. When asked about the early days of his career, Sam paused. It wasn't a dramatic pause, but it lingered just long enough to feel real. He looked slightly downward, as if revisiting a part of his life he doesn't often talk about. And when he began to speak again, his voice carried a different weight. He started describing the years before success. The auditions that didn't go anywhere, the roles he didn't get, and the long periods where nothing seemed to move forward. He spoke about the uncertainty, not knowing whether the effort he was putting in would ever lead to something meaningful. It wasn't bitterness in his voice, but there was honesty, the kind that doesn't try to soften the reality. For many fans, this was unfamiliar territory. They had seen Sam as confident, driven, and always in control. But now, he was talking about doubt. About moments where he questioned whether he was on the right path, whether the sacrifices were worth it, and whether things would ever change. It was a side of his story that rarely makes it into headlines. He admitted that there were times when it felt incredibly isolating. Not because he was alone physically, but because the uncertainty was something he had to carry by himself. Watching others move forward while feeling stuck in the same place created a quiet kind of pressure. It wasn't visible to anyone else, but it was always there. And then he spoke about persistence. About continuing to show up, even when there was no guarantee that anything would come from it. About choosing to keep going, not because it was easy, but because it was the only thing that felt right. That part of his story didn't sound dramatic, but it felt deeply personal. When the conversation shifted toward Outlander, everything changed again. Sam's tone softened, and there was a noticeable shift in his expression. He talked about the moment he was cast, about how unexpected it felt, and how that opportunity changed everything. But instead of focusing on success, he focused on what it meant to finally feel seen. He described it as a turning point. Not just in his career, but in how he saw himself. After years of uncertainty, Outlander gave him something solid, a role, a purpose, and a chance to prove what he had been working toward all along. And as he spoke about it, it became clear that this wasn't just another job to him. It was something he had fought for. There was a brief moment where his voice slowed again. He didn't break down, didn't become overly emotional, but there was a visible effort to stay composed. It was the kind of moment where the feeling is there, just beneath the surface, and everyone watching can sense it. That quiet restraint made the moment even more powerful. Because it wasn't performed. It was real. Sam reflected on how easy it is for people to see the result without understanding the process behind it. From the outside, success can look simple, like a straight path from one opportunity to another. But as he described his journey, it became clear that it was anything but simple. It was built on uncertainty, persistence, and moments that almost made him stop. What made this confession stand out wasn't just what he said, but how he said it. There was no attempt to turn it into something dramatic or inspirational. He wasn't trying to deliver a message or create a viral moment. He was simply telling the truth about what it took to get where he is now. And that honesty changed how the moment felt. For fans watching, it wasn't just a story about a successful actor. It was a reminder that behind every achievement, there are struggles that rarely get seen. The version of Sam Heughan that appears on screen is confident and strong, but the journey to become that person was far more complex. And for a brief moment, he allowed everyone to see that side of him. Not the character, not the public image, but the person who had to push through uncertainty to become who he is today. As the clip began circulating online, the reaction from fans felt very different from the usual wave of excitement or speculation. There were no heated debates, no attempts to twist his words into something dramatic. Instead, what filled the comment sections was something quieter, and in many ways, more powerful. People were listening. Many fans admitted they hadn't expected to feel so affected by what seemed like a simple reflection. But the way Sam spoke, calm, honest, and without trying to impress, made it resonate on a deeper level. It didn't feel like a performance or a carefully crafted message. It felt like a moment that wasn't meant to be dramatic, yet somehow became meaningful anyway. Some began sharing their own experiences. They talked about times when they had doubted themselves, moments where progress felt impossible, or periods where everything seemed uncertain. Sam's story, though rooted in the world of acting, mirrored something many people understood: the quiet struggle of continuing forward without knowing if it will ever pay off. Others focused on a different part of the moment. They pointed out how rare it is for public figures to speak about failure and uncertainty without immediately turning it into a motivational speech. There was no dramatic build-up, no polished lesson at the end. Just a simple acknowledgement that the journey had been difficult, and that those difficulties were real. That authenticity stood out. Fans who had followed Sam for years began looking back at his career with a new perspective. What once seemed like a smooth rise to success now appeared as something much more layered. The confidence they saw today was no longer just part of his personality, it was something he had built over time, through challenges that weren't always visible. The response quickly turned into support. Messages of appreciation began appearing across platforms, with fans thanking him not just for his work, but for his honesty. Some said the moment made them respect him even more. Others said it made him feel less alone in their own struggles, simply because someone they admired had experienced something similar. What made it even more impactful was what didn't happen afterward. Sam didn't return to expand on his words. He didn't post a follow-up message or try to frame the moment in a specific way. He simply left it as it was, a brief, honest reflection that spoke for itself. That silence allowed the moment to remain genuine, untouched by explanation or interpretation. And in a way, that's what gave it lasting meaning. Because it didn't feel like something designed to go viral. It felt like something that just happened, and stayed with people because it was real. There was no need to add more, no need to clarify or reshape it. In the end, the impact of that moment wasn't about shock or surprise. It was about recognition. Fans didn't just see Sam Heughan as a successful actor reflecting on his career. They saw someone who had struggled, doubted, and kept going anyway. And sometimes, that kind of story connects more deeply than anything else. Because behind every success people admire, there's always a version of the story that looks a lot like their own. Messages of appreciation began appearing across platforms, with fans thanking him not just for his work, but for his honesty. Some said the moment made them respect him even more. Others said it made him feel less alone in their own struggles, simply because someone they admired had experienced something similar. What made it even more impactful was what didn't happen afterward. Sam didn't return to expand on his words. He didn't post a follow-up message or try to frame the moment in a specific way. He simply left it as it was, a brief, honest reflection that spoke for itself. That silence allowed the moment to remain genuine, untouched by explanation or interpretation. And in a way, that's what gave it lasting meaning. Because it didn't feel like something designed to go viral. It felt like something that just happened, and stayed with people because it was real. There was no need to add more, no need to clarify or reshape it. In the end, the impact of that moment wasn't about shock or surprise. It was about recognition.